So we've got our first look at the construction on the frozen land being built at Hong Kong Disneyland. So let's dive into all of that up next. This video is sponsored by Mickey Travels, a platinum level authorized Disney vacation planner which can take the hassle out of all of your vacation planning. So visit the link in the description box to get your free quote today. Hi there Waltoneers, I'm Jack and this is of course DSNY Newscast, and with Frozen 2 arriving in theatres this weekend, I thought it would be a great time to check in on the construction of the first of 3 frozen lands that are being built at Disney parks around the world. And yes, if you're wondering, I've got a little bit of a cold today, so sorry about that, but don't worry, the cold never bothered me anyway. So let's get straight into it. As it was 3 years ago yesterday, on November 22nd, 2016, that Hong Kong Disneyland unveiled plans for a huge multi-year expansion project. But little did we know at the time just how important this was going to be, as it gave us a look at what would eventually become the blueprint for replication in other Disney parks around the world. As within this $1.4 billion expansion, it included Disney's first ever Marvel-themed land called an Avengers Campus, and of course a Frozen-themed land officially titled Arendelle World of Frozen. Now in the past, we've discussed and analysed the new concept art released for this land, but now we're finally getting our first look at the construction progress being made in Hong Kong, with the first being this overhead satellite image from Google Earth. That shows us what the state of development on the land was back in August. And since then, we've also received these new aerial images thanks to Twitter user Roger Simo, which I think is the original source for these photos, but if they're not, I'll be sure to update the description box as I receive new information about the sourcing of these photos. But anyways, now let's see what we can glean from these construction photos, as we can clearly see more of the track layout revealed in this earlier satellite image, rather than that of a more detailed aerial photo. And from what we can see, it does not seem to be an exact replica of a Frozen Ever After attraction found in Epcot, as despite some Disney blog sites stating that this would be a clone of the Epcot ride, you can see when compared side by side to the Maelstrom blueprint that the new Hong Kong version shares some of the layout language, but it's also clear that it won't be using the same building and ride design, as after all it wouldn't make much sense for Walt Disney Imagineering to construct an entirely new attraction show building, only to unnecessarily limit themselves to the space restraints within the Norway Pavilion building that was designed and constructed in 1988, as despite the Frozen Ever After attraction being extremely popular within Epcot, it is still a retrofitting and reimagining of the original Maelstrom boat ride, which meant they had to implement limitations on the scale and scope of the set design within the attraction. However, what is true is that this Frozen Ever After attraction boat ride at Hong Kong Disneyland will instead be sharing much of the same ride narrative with similar show scenes that will be plussed for this new version. And this is important, as I've previously reported on how the new Hong Kong version of Frozen Ever After will be coming to Disneyland Paris as well, as we can see here that the size of the show building for the actual ride itself will be roughly 4,600 square meters in Hong Kong, whereas over in Epcot, the entire show building for Frozen Ever After is roughly around 3,000 square meters. So in addition to that, this aerial image seemingly confirms as well that this new version, designed for Disneyland Paris and Hong Kong, will most likely have additional scenes and make for an overall longer ride duration, as the footprint of the building looks to be similar in size to that of It's a Small World, which can be seen in the same image. So despite this being a variant of the Frozen Ever After attraction, the big takeaway here is it won't be exactly the same as Epcot, and will be greatly enhanced based upon the size and layout of the building that they're working with. However, now moving on to the one attraction that is going to be exclusive to Hong Kong's Frozen Land, is Wandering Oaken's Sliding Sleighs, which is going to be a family-friendly roller coaster. And in September, I analysed the new concept art and description to see what we could deduce about this ride. But now, as we can see here in these aerial images, the footprint of the roller coaster seems to be much larger than that of Goofy's Barnstormer, which is what I had previously compared this new roller coaster to because of its simplified ride design. But as we can see here, Goofy's Barnstormer is around 1,500 square meters, whereas judging from the shape of the building over in Hong Kong, the attraction space will be around 2,800 square meters instead.
Now we've also learnt that there's going to be a small confectionery sweet shop in the same building called Northern Delights, but I wouldn't imagine that this is going to be using up too much of that space. Therefore, I predict that there'll be more of a story element and proper show scenes within this relatively simple coaster, quite similar to that of Seven Dwarfs Mine Train in the Magic Kingdom, but without the multiple lift hills. And then lastly, we have this image that was revealed on the official Walt Disney Imagineering site that shows the Frozen Land model being put together. And the big standout here is just how big the North Mountain will be that sits on top of the Frozen Ever After show building, as it's been reported that it will be 134 feet tall, which is even greater than that of the Cars Land Ornament Valley rockwork, which stands at 125 feet. But anyways, that's everything that we can deduce about the Frozen Land coming to Hong Kong and subsequently Disneyland Paris as well for now. But we'll be sure to track the development, as this new Frozen Land is set to open in Hong Kong in 2021. But now let's talk about Disneyland Paris, as their version of this Frozen themed land isn't going to open until 2023. So in the meantime, Disneyland Paris have decided to reimagine the Art of Animation building into the Animation Celebration, which is a 22-minute small stage show which is standing room only for the guests, as the Art of Animation building really isn't that big. But for the space restraints, I've got to say that Disneyland Paris has done a pretty great job of creating two small stages that make excellent use of projections, lighting and screens to create a sense of depth and size that really isn't there. So in summary, this is a great little addition to the park that gives a permanent presence to Frozen in a previously underutilized space. But then again, there's not really much more to be said on this matter, except I would highly recommend to go ahead and watch the full show on DLRP Fans' YouTube channel, as I'll be putting a link in the description box below. And then lastly for today, of course, I'm going to give a Frozen 2 review. So if you don't want any spoilers or you haven't seen the movie yet, go ahead and skip to the timestamp displayed on the screen right now, so therefore you can avoid all spoilers regarding the movie. So first of all, I've got to begin by offering a disclaimer beforehand, and that is I was never the biggest fan of the original Frozen when it was released in 2013. But over the years, after repeat viewings, I've come to appreciate it for the cultural phenomenon that it became. And in many ways, if it wasn't for the huge success of Frozen, then who knows what the state of Disney animation would be in today. So with all of that being established, I would say that I thought that the story behind Frozen 2 was extremely strong and much better than the original, as the 2013 film had many plot holes that are now, thankfully, somewhat rectified in Frozen 2. But the one that remains the most puzzling for me is if there was a magical enchanted forest that has always been on the outskirts of Arendelle, then why didn't it feature in the original Frozen? Especially when the Queen suddenly displays magical ice powers. And you also have the issue that Anna and Elsa were even told about the forest by their father when they were young. So surely that would have been one of the first places they would have explored in the events of Frozen 1. And there are many more instances of little leaps of logic like this throughout the two movies. But then again, this is a Disney animated movie, and so by its very classification, not everything needs to be explained. However, I've got to say I really did enjoy the new character developments made to Olaf, and thought it was very clever that the directors had Olaf better reflect the younger audience from 2013, having grown up since then. And then the dynamic between Kristoff and Anna was really strong and in many ways the heart of the movie. And once again, Sven is one of the best characters in the whole Frozen franchise, and the addition of Bruni, despite not being absolutely necessary, was an adorable addition nevertheless. But my main criticism is for the direction of Elsa, as she seemingly makes some very rash decisions that endangers not only her family, but also the people of Arendelle. That is completely uncharacteristic of her based upon the original Frozen and the rest of the Frozen animated shorts, as there's a moment when Elsa sends Anna away in a canoe, which was deceptive, reckless, and if played in a slightly different tone, could almost be seen as villainous. And then we come to the music, which was fairly good. However, I felt that it wasn't as catchy as the original movie soundtrack, with a couple of exceptions like Some Things Never Change and When I Am Older, being the songs that I couldn't get out of my head when exiting the theatre. But overall, I felt that the soundtrack didn't evoke a Disney musical, but instead something more along the lines of Les Mis or Wicked. And this could have been because the incredible musical duo of the Lopez's had an insurmountable and unenvious task of writing musical sequels to that iconic original soundtrack, and so instead they decided to go in the opposite direction to stop any direct comparisons. and despite really enjoying the Christoph 80s rock ballad Lost in the Woods, I fear that this direction of being more meta within Disney movies, especially a classic princess movie like this, will inevitably make them less timeless. So overall, I would say that if you could take the soundtrack from Frozen 1 and mix it with the narrative of Frozen 2, you would have a perfect animated movie. But then again, I know I'm really not the intended audience for this movie. And so I also realised that I might have missed the mark completely and may just be plain wrong, which is certainly something that is a strong possibility, as everyone else I've seen talk about this movie absolutely loved it. And so despite what I may feel about this movie, it's pretty undeniable that this is also going to be a huge phenomenon, just like the original in 2013. But now, it's over to you, the Waltoniers. I would like to know if you could enhance an existing Disney park attraction with an entirely new build of that attraction, much in the same way that Imagineering are doing with Frozen Ever After from Epcot into Hong Kong Disneyland and Disneyland Paris, then which attraction would you greatly enhance, and how would you do it to make it even better? And of course, don't forget to put the timestamp for where the hidden Mickey appeared somewhere within this video, along with your suggestion or your comment, to be with a chance to win one of these official DSNY Newscast enamel pins. And congratulations to this Waltonier here for this suggestion from the previous video where I gave my full extensive review of the Disney Plus streaming service. And so that's it for today, so be sure to go ahead and subscribe down below if you're new to this channel, hit that notification icon so that you always receive an update whenever we release new videos, which are usually twice a week, and also if you've enjoyed today's video all about the construction of a Frozen land, then be sure to give this video a massive thumbs up as it really does help this channel out. And I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.